is x to the third minus 3x squared plus x minus 3. Okay, that p of x is equal to what? What do we set it equal to so that we can solve? 0, okay? Does it really matter if I write that 0? Not technically, not now anyways. So what I want to do, what is my constant term? Okay, and what are the factors of 3? 1 and 3, okay? And then my leading coefficient, the factors of it are just 1. Okay, so just like we did last week when we listed our possible rational solutions, it's positive or negative, constant, divided by leading. We'll start with the 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. And then we do plus or minus 3 divided by 1. And because my constant term is small, those are the only factors, right? Dividing this number by that number. 1 divided by 1 is 1. And then we do the same thing with the second number. Yeah. Okay, so that doesn't mean that all 4 of those are solutions. That means that those are possible rational solutions. If I'm looking at this polynomial, how many solutions should I have when I'm finished? I should have 3, right? Because it's next to the third? Okay. At least one of them is going to be a rational number, meaning positive 1, negative 1, positive 3, negative 3. The other ones don't necessarily have to be rational numbers. They can be, but they don't have to be. All right, so we did step 1. It's listing all of our possible rational solutions. Step 2 says we are going to use synthetic division to find 1 or more, and you see it says or more if needed. I'll tell you what that means in just a second. Solutions. If I'm going to do synthetic division and I'm dividing by a number, how do I know it's a solution? My remainder would have to be 0. Okay? If my remainder is not 0, that number that I'm trying is not a solution, and I have to move on to the next option. The reason I said 1 or more, in order to solve an equation, we have to get it down to a quadratic, which is an x squared. Okay? So if I start with x to the third, I only need to divide by one number to get it down to x squared, right? What if I started with an x to the fourth? How many would I have to find there to get it down to x squared? I'd have to find 2. If I started with an x to the fifth, I'd have to find 3. So it depends on the polynomial, how high the degree is, on how many solutions you need to find before we can go to step 3. Does that make a little bit of sense? All right, so this is what we're going to do. How many options do I have for rational solutions up there? 3. I technically have 4 possibilities, right? Positive 1, negative 1, positive 3, negative 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up synthetic division using the coefficients of my polynomial. Bless you, 1x to the third minus 3x squared plus 1x minus 3. And what I want you to do is start with positive 1. What we're looking for is we're going to work out this synthetic division. I need the remainder to be 0 if 1 is going to be a solution. If the remainder is not 0, that means 1 is not a solution, and we'll have to go again. Okay, so right now I want you to set up your synthetic division, divide it out with the 1, and see if you get a remainder of 0. Sometimes just hold that. There you go. Okay, so that's one of your answers, right? Does it make you remember? So we put that out to the side. We're going to have 2 of these. It's just that number. Yeah, plus or minus. See my list right now, the plus or minus 1 and the plus or minus 3? I'm starting with positive 1. So positive 1, negative 1, positive 3, and negative 3 are my possible rational solutions. I'm just trying to find one that gives me 0 for a remainder. If the first one doesn't work, yeah. Does 1 work? No. Okay, let's look at this. If I divide by synthetic and I work it out, I'm looking to see if I get a remainder of 0, which I do not in this question, right? So 1 does not work. You try all of them. 1, negative 1, until you find one that works. Sometimes you get lucky and the first one you try works.
Is there like a way to not have to try every single number?
Yes. I'm going to tell you in just a minute. Okay. Elia? Yeah, just hold tight for that right there. Yeah. All right, so then after we try positive 1, we should try negative 1. Again, sometimes you get lucky and one of the first ones you try works. Sometimes you have to go through multiple tries, attempts, to get one that is a solution. So we tried positive 1. It didn't work. We're now trying negative 1. And I will show you a trick in just a couple minutes on how to eliminate at least one option. Does negative 1 work? Whoops. That one doesn't work either, does it? Okay. So positive 1 didn't work. Negative 1 didn't work. What should I try next? 3? Does everybody understand where I'm getting these numbers from?
Yes.
It's from my list. Okay. That's why we have to make that list first, because that tells me what numbers I'm going to divide by.
Oh, wait, so it's not the whole numbers?
Right.
Okay, so it's just the numbers.
It's just when we make our list, constant divided by the, when we list that possible rational solutions, we're going through those.
Oh, it's plus or minus, sorry.
Yes. Yep. Does 3 work? Yes. All right. Whoops. Okay. I'm going to do some erasing real quick. All right, does everybody agree with me that 3 is one of my solutions? Yes, okay. So we've done step 2 now. Step 3, once we get it down, we've divided enough times, we only had to divide once. We're going to write the quadratic equation that I have left based off of my numbers in my synthetic division. Okay, so we're focusing on these numbers here. Do you remember how we did that? We started with x to the third, so this one is going to be a 1x squared, and then I would have how many x's? 0, right? And then what kind of 1 would be there? Plus 1. Okay, and then I'm going to set that equal to 0. That is my quadratic that is left over after I find that 3 is one of my solutions. That's step 3. Make a little bit of sense? Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that quadratic. I'm going to come back over here, bring it up here, the x squared plus 1, and I'm going to solve it. And we talked yesterday about multiple ways to solve these quadratics. We can try to factor. Does that thing factor? Does x squared plus 1 factor? Then we did the perfect square thing, right, when we had x squared and a number. Or we could do the quadratic formula. What's the easiest way to solve x squared plus 1 equals 0? Subtract the 1 over, yep. Then what? Take the square root, yep. And anytime we take the square root, what's the first thing we should write? Plus or minus. And then we need to simplify as much as possible. What is the square root of negative 1? I. Okay. Now here's where I need to make sure you understand what we're looking for. We're looking for our solutions. How many solutions are we supposed to have in this thing? 3. What was the first one that I found? Whoops, I just covered it up instead of highlighted it. Sorry. What was the first one we found? 3. Okay, so when I write in my answer blank, I'm going to write 3, comma, what are my other 2 solutions? Positive and negative I. You can write them together as plus or minus I, like this. Whoops. Or you could write it as 3, comma I, comma negative I. Either way, I should have 3 values in my answer blank. Everybody okay with that? All right, first thing I want you to do is after you write down your polynomial is list your possible rational solutions. Okay, we need to get through at least 4 examples today, so we need to be focused. Because I need to show you a certain type of things. You only have 4 questions for homework because they do take a little bit of time.
Oh my God.
And then when we start this one, I'm going to tell you the trick that I told you I would tell you. All right, so go ahead, set up your list your possible rational solutions. Once you have that list, then you can go ahead and set up your synthetic division and start working on trying to find one that gives me a remainder of 0. Well, no, we're not finished. We have to still solve it, but if you don't know what to do next, you can pause and do it. We're listing all of our possible rational solutions. That is the very first thing we're wanting to do. Factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. Factors of 1 are 1. So my possibilities are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, and plus or minus 6. Does everybody agree with that? 1x to the third, 4x squared, 1x minus 6. Did we get lucky this time in the first one we tried? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to try positive 1, and it lucks out that this one actually works. Okay. Everybody good with that? Okay, now before I continue, here's my trick. The trick is for a positive 1 only. If you take a look at your coefficients, okay, of the original polynomial, so these numbers right here, if you add those digits up, 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 1 is 6, plus negative 6 gives me 0. If those coefficients of your original polynomial add up to be 0, then 1 will be a solution. If those coefficients don't add up to be 0, 1 will not work, so there's no need to try it. And that's the only shortcut I can give you is trying out 1. If those coefficients add up to be 0, then 1 will be a solution, and you won't have to go any further. If they don't add up to be 0, then there's no need to even try 1. Is everybody good so far? Only for 1. All right, so we found one solution, which was all we needed because we started with an x to the third. So let's look at our quadratic. It's going to be 1 what? X squared, and then plus 5x, and then plus 6. And now we have to solve this thing. Again, we can factor, perfect squares, or quadratic formula. It just depends on what kind of quadratic equation you're left with. If I have a trinomial, the very first thing I'm always going to do is try to factor, because that's easier than doing a quadratic formula, right? Okay, so look at this trinomial, x squared plus 5x plus 6. Does it factor? There are numbers that multiply to give me 6 and add to give me 5. What are they? So we're going to set up our 2 parentheses. Both of my signs are the same, and they're both going to be addition. but I have to continue to solve for x. So once I get it factored, what do I do with each one of those? Set them equal to 0. Yep. Excuse me. And I solve for x. And then in my answer blank, I need to write all of my answers. How many should there be? 3. And the reason I keep saying this is because it seems every year we do this on the test, people forget about the answer that they got with synthetic division and they only give me the result of the quadratic. Okay, so don't forget the one that you got first. What was the first answer we got? 1, okay, because that's one there. And then what were the other two answers? -2 and -3 for a total of 3 answers. Okay, so it's not that this is extremely difficult, it's just a process, especially when the first few factors don't work. It takes a little bit of time. Is everybody okay? All right, I'm going to do one more with you because this one's a little bit different, and then I'll let you try the last one. I told y'all yesterday this stuff was a little bit on the difficult side. It is time consuming, yeah. So first question while you're writing, what is different about this one? It's an x to the 4th, okay? Every other one we've done so far is an x to the 3rd. So this one is going to require a little bit more work because to go from an x to the 4th down to an x squared, how many answers will I need to find first before I can get to x squared? 2. I'm going to have to find 2 of them. So first things first, go ahead and list your possible rational solutions. Once you have your list of possible rational solutions, go ahead and set up your synthetic division. You can do your little trick to see if positive 1 works. That way, if it doesn't, you don't have to waste your time dividing it out. If it does, then you know automatically that's going to give you one of your answers. Yesterday, we talked about solving one purpose squares and solving one. We didn't do all of this just so listing our possible rational solutions, we have a larger list today. Hopefully we don't have to go through too many. Okay. Once you find one solution, stop. Don't go any further. Put in just a second. Okay, so if I set up my synthetic, my check to see if positive 1 is going to work is by adding all of those coefficients. If they are all positive, is there any way they're going to add to be 0? Yeah. No. Okay, so do I waste my time trying positive 1? No, because it's not going to work. So I'm going to try the next one, whoops, which would be -1. Does that one work? Yes. Okay. And that's where I told you guys to stop. I'm going to let everybody catch up writing this before we continue. I've only found one answer. So I go from an x to the fourth to an x to the third. I cannot solve the remaining until I get it down to an x squared, which means I'm going to have to do synthetic division one more time. Okay? And here's what we do. We take the coefficients that are in the result of the one I just did, minus the remainder. You don't use the remainder. Okay, so we're going to set up another synthetic division using those highlighted coefficients minus the remainder. Okay, now, if one didn't work the first time, will one work again? No. Okay, so there's no need to try one. We've already found negative one. And on a rare occasion, negative one would be another answer, but I try to avoid those because that just wastes your time a lot. So we've done that positive one, we've done negative one. So what would be the next number I need to try? 2. Okay, so try 2. See if that works. If 2 doesn't work, then we can try negative 2, and we keep going on our list until we find one more that gives me a remainder of 0. Okay, again, we're using those coefficients from the bottom of our synthetic minus the remainder for the next time. Once you find the next one that gives you a remainder of 0, then you can write your quadratic from that leftover part, and continue to solve. So we should try 2. That doesn't work. We should try -2. That doesn't work. We should try 3. -3. And we continue on 4, -4, 6, -6, 12, -12. Hopefully, we won't have to go through too many of them before we find another 0. Again, some of these problems will take quite a bit of paper. Does positive 2 work? Does negative 2 work? Does positive 3 work? Does negative 3 work? Yeah. Okay. All right, so don't forget when we write our final answer, -1 is a solution and so is -3. We have to figure out what the remaining solutions are. What is my quadratic going to look like? We divided x to the fourth. We got one answer. That took me to an x to the third. Then we got another, which takes me to a 1x squared. How many x's do I have? 0. And then it's going to be plus 4. And that is very similar to number 1, right? Once we got our answer. So I have x squared plus 4 equals 0. Would I try to factor that, or can it factor? No. But we can do it with our perfect squares, right? How do I get rid of that 4? Subtract it. And then we take the square root. The first thing I'm going to put is plus or minus. And what does the square root of -4 simplify to be? 2i. So when I write my answers in my answer blank, -1, -3, and then you can either write it as plus or minus 2i or positive 2i comma negative 2i. Either way you want to do it for a total of 4 answers, okay, because of that x to the 4th. Are we kind of okay? All right, I got one more I want you to do. Don't worry, I'm taking you back to an x to the third. Let me erase whatever that is right there. There. Okay, I want you to do that one. Just a hint, when you get to your quadratic, we've done the factoring. We've done the perfect squares, but we haven't had to do the quadratic formula. So hint, hint, that might be what you need to do. Okay, let's take it as far as we can. This is the last one to do. Always try your trick for a positive one to be going. That way you don't have to necessarily waste your time. Is this for the last one? Oh, yeah. So when you divide it out, once we find negative one, we're going to use these numbers. Use the original numbers. So what I'm saying is you're going to have to set up your synthetic so you know use 1, 3, 4. Then you start with that. Let's see what's that. We got the first two right, just not the second two. Oh, let me write the quadratic formula for you. I forgot. Is that what you needed, Lily? Good news is I don't have very many options for my possible rational solutions. 1, -1, -7. Positive 3. Quick question. Does positive 1 work? No. All right, so then I try negative 1. Does negative 1 work? No. Then I try positive 3. Does that work? Yes. All right, so that's 2, that's 6, that's negative 1, that's negative 3. All right. And so then my quadratic is going to be 1x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. Now, again, I always, if I get a trinomial, I try to factor, but I kind of told you it didn't factor from the beginning. But are there numbers that multiply to give me 1 and subtract to give me 2? No. All right. So then I have to do the quadratic. What is A? 1. What is B? And C is negative 1. So then we're going to go plugging it in. The opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So let's see, the opposite of 2 is negative 2 plus or minus, what's 2 squared? 4. And then I have a negative 4 times 1 times negative 1, which is going to give me what kind of 4? Positive. So that's going to give me negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 8 over 2. And then remember like that example we did yesterday where we had the 56 under the square root. We had to try to break it up to see if there was a perfect square in there. 8's not a perfect square, but what perfect square does go into 8? 4. So we're going to break that up into 4 and 2. So we get negative 2 plus or minus, what is the square root of 4? 2. Okay, so I have negative 2 plus or minus 2 square roots of 2 over 2. And then we talked yesterday about the number in front of the plus or minus, the number behind the plus or minus, and the number in the denominator. Can they all divide by the same thing? Yeah, they can all divide by 2. Okay, so what's negative 2 divided by 2? Negative 1. Plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1. That radical doesn't get touched. And then in the bottom, 2 divided by 2 is also 1. What's the more simplified way to write that? Negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 2. Okay. But remember, in my answer blank, how many answers do I need? 3. So what was the first one that we found? Okay, 3. And then the negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 2 represents my other 2 answers for a total of 3. Everybody good?